The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eloise Hartwell's study, casting long shadows across Persian rugs worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. She reclined in her leather chair, eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. To anyone watching, she appeared to be sleeping. But Eloise Hartwell never truly slept, not when trust was at stake. 73 years of building an empire had taught her one immutable truth: everyone had a price. Business partners who swore loyalty betrayed her for stock options. Lawyers she'd paid fortunes to had sold her secrets to competitors. Even her own nephew had forged documents trying to access her accounts. The world was a marketplace of broken promises, and she had learned to expect nothing less. Yet here, in this deliberately staged moment, she was testing a different theory. Perhaps honesty existed somewhere. Perhaps it could still be found in those too young to have learned the art of deception. The safe sat exactly where she had positioned it, 12 inches from the edge of her mahogany desk. Door slightly ajar. Stacks of $100 bills visible inside, at least $50,000 arranged in neat bundles. The bait was set. Through barely opened eyelids, Eloise watched the study door. The household staff had their routines. Maria, the head housekeeper, would be supervising the West Wing. The gardeners were occupied with the rose garden. And Maria's daughter, Sophia, a girl of barely 12 years, had been sent to dust the study shelves. Footsteps approached, light and careful on the hardwood floor. Eloise remained perfectly still, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of sleep. Her pulse quickened despite her outward calm. This moment would tell her everything she needed to know. The door creaked open. Sophia entered quietly, a dust cloth in one small hand. The girl moved like a shadow, trained by her mother never to disturb the household's wealthiest resident. Eloise could hear the soft whisper of the cloth against the bookshelves, the gentle displacement of air as Sophia worked her way around the room. Then the movement stopped. Eloise knew without looking. Sophia had seen the safe. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Would the girl call out, alert someone to the careless mistake of leaving wealth exposed? Would she simply continue her work, pretending she'd seen nothing? Or would she do what Eloise had watched dozens of adults do over the years, what she had come to expect from human nature itself? Would she take what wasn't hers? Eloise's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she waited for the answer that would determine everything that came next. The silence in the study became suffocating. Eloise maintained her facade of sleep, but every nerve in her body was alert, focused on the girl standing frozen somewhere behind her. She could hear Sophia's breathing, quick and shallow. The child had seen the money. Now came the moment of truth. A floorboard creaked. Sophia was moving, but not toward the door. The footsteps drew closer to the desk, slow and hesitant. Each step seemed to stretch for an eternity. Eloise's fingers curled slightly against the armrest of her chair, her only outward sign of tension. What was the girl thinking? What calculations were running through that young mind? Another step. Closer now. Eloise thought of Sophia's mother, Maria, who had worked in this house for 8 years. A woman who arrived before dawn and left after dusk, whose hands were perpetually red from cleaning solutions, who never asked for raises or complained about the work. Maria had a quiet dignity about her, a pride that seemed rare in an age of entitlement. But pride didn't pay for the medications Eloise knew Maria's elderly mother needed. Pride didn't cover the cost of Sophia's schoolbooks or the shabby apartment they shared across town. $50,000 would change their lives. The thought must have occurred to Sophia too. How could it not? At 12 years old, she was old enough to understand money, to see how her mother struggled, to know that this amount of cash represented years of her mother's salary. Another step. Sophia was at the desk now. Eloise could picture the scene without opening her eyes. The girl would be standing there, staring at the bills, wrestling with temptation. The safe door hung open like an invitation, like a test she didn't know she was taking. This was the cruelty of the experiment, Eloise realized with a sharp pang of something she didn't want to name. She was dangling hope in front of a child, watching to see if desperation would overcome morality. But the world was cruel too, wasn't it? Better to learn that lesson here, in this controlled environment, than out there where the stakes were even higher. She heard a soft intake of breath. Sophia's hand must be reaching out. Eloise's own breath caught in her throat. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Everything she believed about human nature, everything she had built her life upon, was about to be confirmed or shattered by the choice of a 12-year-old girl. The rustle of cloth against paper. The whisper of movement. Then nothing. The silence returned, but different now. Charged with decision. Weighted with consequence. Eloise waited, her heart hammering against her ribs, wondering what choice had been made in that terrible, beautiful moment of silence. Sophia's fingertips brushed the cool metal of the safe. Eloise felt rather than heard it, the slight vibration traveling through the desk, the whisper of contact. Her chest tightened. This was it. The girl was touching the safe. In seconds, she would know whether her cynicism about human nature was justified, whether even innocence could be corrupted by opportunity. But the sound that followed wasn't the rustle of bills being removed. It was the quiet click of the safe door being pushed, not open, but closed. Eloise's eyes flew open despite herself. Through the reflection in the window glass before her, she saw Sophia's small figure stepping back from the desk. The girl's hand retreated to her side, the dust cloth still clutched in her fingers. Her face was pale, her expression troubled, but there was something else there too. Resolution. The face of someone who had looked into temptation and turned away. Sophia stood motionless for a moment, staring at the now closed safe. Then she did something that made Eloise's throat constrict with unexpected emotion. The girl looked at Eloise's seemingly sleeping form, then quietly adjusted a picture frame on the desk that had been knocked slightly askew. A small act of care. A gesture of respect. She returned to her dusting as if nothing had happened. Eloise remained frozen, her mind reeling. In 40 years of testing employees, business partners, and family members, no one had ever closed the safe. They either took the money outright or reported the careless mistake to gain favor. No one had simply, quietly, protected her wealth and asked for nothing in return. The girl didn't know she was being watched. There was no performance here, no calculation of reward. Sophia had made her choice in what she believed was pure privacy, when character was truly tested, when only her own conscience was watching. Eloise felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd built brick by careful brick over decades. She had been so certain that everyone was corruptible, that nobility was a fairy tale told to children. But here was a child teaching her about nobility. What did that say about the world? Or worse, what did it say about her? Sophia finished her dusting and moved toward the door, her steps light and quick. She was almost gone when Eloise spoke. Sophia. The girl jumped, spinning around with wide eyes. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I was trying to be quiet. Eloise sat up slowly, studying the child's face. Fear was there, yes, the natural fear any staff member's child would feel at disturbing the wealthy woman who could end their family's employment with a word. But there was no guilt. No shifty glances toward the safe. No telltale signs of a conscience wrestling with theft. Come here, child, Eloise said softly. Sophia approached hesitantly, the dust cloth twisted in her nervous hands. Eloise reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small item. A silver bookmark she'd received years ago, engraved with a quote she'd long since stopped believing. Character is what you do when no one is watching. She held it out to Sophia. This is for you. The girl stared at the bookmark, confused. I don't understand, Mrs. Hartwell. You will, Eloise said, her voice rough with emotion she couldn't quite control. Someday you will. As Sophia left the study, clutching the bookmark with trembling fingers, Eloise turned back to the window. For the first time in decades, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the world. Perhaps not everyone had a price after all. And that terrified her more than any betrayal ever had. 3 days passed before Eloise called Sophia back to her study. During those 3 days, she watched. She observed Sophia helping her mother carry supplies without being asked. She noticed how the girl organized books by height on the library shelves, a small touch that showed care beyond mere duty. She saw Sophia return a dropped earring she'd found in the hallway, a piece of jewelry worth more than her mother's monthly salary. Each observation confirmed what Eloise had witnessed that afternoon. This wasn't a performance. This was character. The realization unsettled Eloise in ways she couldn't articulate. She had built an empire on the assumption that everyone could be bought, that loyalty was simply a matter of finding the right price. Her business strategies, her security measures, her very approach to life had been constructed on that foundation. If that foundation was flawed, what did it mean for everything she had built? On the evening of the third day, she summoned Sophia. The girl arrived precisely at 7, her school uniform neat despite obvious wear, her hair pulled back in a careful braid. Maria hovered anxiously in the doorway until Eloise dismissed her with a wave. "Sit," Eloise instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite her desk. Sophia perched on the edge of the seat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, watched Eloise with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Do you know why I've asked you here?" Eloise began. "No, ma'am. You closed my safe the other day." Sophia's face went pale. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have touched it. I just thought it should be closed. I didn't mean to overstep." "That's not what I'm asking about." Eloise leaned forward. "The safe had money in it. A great deal of money. You saw it, didn't you?" The girl's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am." "And yet you didn't take any." Sophia looked genuinely confused by the question. "It wasn't mine." Such a simple answer. Such a profound truth. It wasn't hers, so she didn't take it. When had that basic principle become so rare? Eloise opened a drawer and withdrew an envelope. "I want to give you something, Sophia. Not because you didn't steal from me, but because you showed something far more valuable than honesty. You showed integrity when you thought no one was watching." She slid the envelope across the desk. Sophia opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a check for $5,000 made out to Maria Santos, along with a letter. "That's for your mother," Eloise explained. "To help with whatever your family needs. The letter explains that I'm establishing an educational fund for you. When you're ready for university, the tuition will be covered." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't understand." "Why?" "Because the world needs more people like you," Eloise said, surprised by the thickness in her own voice. "Because I've spent 50 years believing that everyone is corruptible, and you proved me wrong. That's worth investing in." But even as she spoke the words, a shadow of doubt crept into Eloise's mind. How long would this innocence last? How many years before the world ground Sophia's integrity down? Before she learned that honesty was a luxury and survival required compromise? Sophia clutched the envelope to her chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. Thank you so much." After the girl left, Eloise sat alone in her study as darkness fell outside. She had done a good thing, she told herself. She had rewarded virtue. But the cynical part of her, the part that had kept her alive and wealthy in a cutthroat world, whispered a different interpretation. She had just painted a target on Sophia's back. Anyone who learned about this reward would see the girl not as virtuous, but as valuable. They would see opportunity. They would see something to exploit. Eloise's hand trembled as she poured herself a drink. She had thought she was conducting a simple test. Instead, she had set events in motion that she couldn't control. And somewhere in her vast house, she knew there were people watching, calculating, wondering how they could profit from the billionaire's sudden interest in the housekeeper's daughter. The real test, she realized with growing dread, was only beginning. Because if the world was going to grind that girl's integrity away, Eloise would make damn sure she was equipped to resist. She would teach Sophia not just about money and business, but about survival. About how to maintain your principles in a world designed to strip them away. It was the least she could do, and perhaps the most important thing she would ever do. The orchids swayed gently in the climate-controlled air, beautiful and fragile and surviving against all odds in their artificial paradise. The next morning, Eloise called Sophia to her study again. This time, Maria came too, summoned by a request that had left both mother and daughter anxious through a sleepless night. They stood together in front of the massive desk, Maria's hand protectively on her daughter's shoulder, both wearing their Sunday clothes despite it being a Wednesday. "Sit," Eloise instructed, her voice gentler than usual. The events of the previous day had left her raw, but also clarified. She had spent the night thinking about legacy, about what she would leave behind when she was gone. Money was meaningless if there was no one worthy to inherit not just the wealth, but the wisdom required to use it well. "Mrs. Hartwell," Maria began, her voice shaking slightly, "if Sophia has done something wrong..." "Your daughter has done nothing wrong. Quite the opposite." Eloise folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to be direct with you both. Maria, you've worked for me for 8 years. In that time, you've proven yourself to be reliable, discreet, and honest. Your daughter has demonstrated qualities that are even rarer." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "I want to offer Sophia a position as my personal apprentice." Both Maria and Sophia stared at her in confusion. "I don't understand," Maria said carefully. "I'm 73 years old," Eloise continued. "I've built an empire, but empires mean nothing if they crumble the moment their creator dies. I've watched my nephew squander money on sports cars and gambling. I've seen business partners steal rather than earn. Just yesterday, I discovered my financial advisor of 15 years has been embezzling from me." Maria's eyes widened in shock. "The world is full of people who want wealth but have no understanding of how to build it, maintain it, or use it responsibly. Your daughter closed a safe full of money instead of stealing from it. That simple act told me more about her character than 1,000 background checks could reveal." Eloise leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I want to teach Sophia everything I know. Finance, investment, business strategy, negotiation. How to read people, how to protect herself, how to build something that lasts. She'll continue her regular schooling, but 3 afternoons a week and Saturday mornings she'll work with me." "But why?" Sophia's voice was small, overwhelmed. "Because I've spent 50 years believing that everyone is corrupt, and you proved me wrong. Because the world needs people with integrity who also have power. Because I'd rather leave my legacy to someone who will use it well than watch it be squandered by blood relatives who see it as nothing more than money to spend." Eloise pulled out another document. "This is separate from the educational fund I already established. Maria, your salary will triple, and you'll be moved into the guest house on the property. Sophia will be paid for her time as my apprentice. Not because she needs to earn this opportunity, but because work should be valued." Tears streaked down Maria's face. "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't know what to say. Say yes or say no. But understand that this isn't charity. I'm going to work Sophia harder than any teacher ever has. I'm going to teach her about the real world, the cruel parts that most people her age are shielded from. She'll learn about betrayal, about competition, about the 1,000 ways people will try to use her once they realize she has value." She fixed Sophia with a steady gaze. "I'm going to try to prepare you for a world that will test you every single day. Are you willing to learn?" Sophia looked at her mother, then back at Eloise. The girl's voice was stronger when she spoke. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. We start tomorrow. 4 o'clock. Don't be late." After they left, Eloise stood at her window, watching Sophia and Maria walk across the grounds toward their car. The girl looked back once at the house, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. Eloise knew that look. She'd worn it herself once, decades ago, when she'd first stepped into a boardroom full of men who assumed she was someone's secretary. The world had tried to break her then, and it would try to break Sophia too. But this time, Eloise thought with grim satisfaction, the world would face someone who was prepared. Someone who understood that integrity and intelligence weren't opposing forces, but the most powerful combination of all. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. Found the partner. You're not going to like it." Eloise closed her eyes briefly. "Of course not. She never did. But as she turned to read the message, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not hope, exactly. She wasn't naive enough for hope anymore. Purpose. That's what it was. For the first time in years, she had a purpose beyond mere accumulation, beyond protecting what she'd built. She had someone to teach, someone to prepare, someone who might actually be worthy of what she'd spent a lifetime creating. The message from Marcus opened on her screen, revealing the partner's name, and her breath caught. This was going to be more complicated than she'd thought. Much more complicated. The name on Eloise's screen made her blood run cold. Catherine Hartwell Pierce. Her niece. Of course it was family. It was always family. The ones who felt entitled to your fortune simply because they shared your DNA, who saw inheritance as a right rather than something to be earned. Catherine. 42 years old, twice divorced, currently living in the West Wing of Eloise's estate under the pretense of family support during difficult times. A pretense Eloise had foolishly believed because Catherine was her late sister's only child, and blood was supposed to mean something. Eloise had given Catherine a trust fund at 18. She'd paid for 2 elaborate weddings and subsidized both expensive divorces. She'd written recommendation letters for jobs Catherine never kept and covered debts from spending Catherine never stopped. And this was how she was repaid. With theft. With betrayal orchestrated alongside Robert Thornfield. "Get me everything," Eloise told Marcus over the phone. "Every text, every email, every transaction between them. Already compiling it. Mrs. Hartwell, there's more. Catherine has been tracking your movements for weeks. She knows about Sophia." The words hit like ice water. "What do you mean she knows about Sophia?" "She's been asking the staff questions. Who you've been meeting with. Why you're spending time with Maria's daughter. I've got 3 separate reports of her trying to pump various employees for information." Eloise's mind raced. Catherine knew about Sophia, which meant Catherine would see her as a threat. Or worse, as an opportunity. A leveraged point to be exploited. Double security around Maria and Sophia. "I want someone watching them at all times. Discreetly. Already arranged. And Marcus? Be ready to move quickly. I don't know what Catherine's planning, but I know my niece. She doesn't wait. She acts." That evening, Eloise sat in the formal dining room, a space she rarely used. Catherine joined her at the far end of the long table, dressed impeccably as always, her smile warm and false. "And Eloise, this is such a lovely surprise. We haven't had dinner together in ages." "Sit," Eloise said, her tone carefully neutral. "We need to talk." Catherine settled into her chair, accepting wine from the server with practiced grace. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Eloise watched her niece over the rim of her own glass. Catherine had her mother's features, soft and elegant, but none of her mother's warmth. Behind those blue eyes was calculation, always calculating. "I've been thinking about legacy," Eloise began. "About what happens to my estate when I'm gone." Catherine's posture shifted, barely perceptible, but Eloise had spent a lifetime reading tales. Interest. Hunger. Anticipation. "It's natural to think about such things," Catherine said smoothly. "Though I hope that's many years away." "Do you?" Eloise set down her glass. "Tell me, Catherine, what do you think you deserve from my estate?" The question hung in the air, too direct to deflect easily. Catherine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't think about it in terms of deserving, Aunt Eloise. I'm family. Yes, you are. And I've provided for you generously throughout your life. The question is whether that generosity should continue after I'm gone. I'm your only living relative," Catherine said, her voice taking on an edge. "Your sister's daughter. That has to count for something. It counts for what it's always counted for. Conditional support based on your choices and behavior." Eloise leaned forward. "I've noticed you've been taking an interest in my household staff lately. Particularly Maria Santos and her daughter." Catherine's face remained carefully composed. "I was simply being friendly. You spend so much time alone, Aunt Eloise. I thought perhaps you might appreciate someone taking an interest in the people who work here." "How thoughtful," Eloise said dryly. "And your sudden interest in my financial arrangements? Also thoughtfulness?" A flash of something dangerous crossed Catherine's face before the mask slipped back into place. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Eloise stood, placing her napkin on the table with deliberate precision. "Let me be very clear, Catherine. I know about Robert Thornfield. I know about the shell company. I know about the $200,000. Catherine's face went pale, then flushed with anger. The mask shattered. "You don't understand," Catherine hissed, abandoning all pretense. "You sit here in your mansion, in your perfect life, and judge everyone. You've never struggled. You've never had to worry about money. I built this fortune from nothing while people like you waited for handouts. And now you're going to give it to some housekeeper's brat?" Catherine stood, her voice rising. "I've seen how you look at her, Aunt Eloise. Like she's something special. She's nothing. Just another manipulative child who figured out how to play you." "Get out of my house," Eloise said quietly, each word sharp as a blade. "You have until morning to pack your things. You can't do this. I'm family. Family earns its place. You've lost yours." Eloise turned to Marcus, who had appeared in the doorway. "Please escort Ms. Pierce to her rooms and ensure she doesn't access any other part of the house." As Marcus moved forward, Catherine's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. You think you can replace me with that little nobody? I'll destroy her. I'll make sure she understands what happens to people who try to take what's mine." "Is that a threat against a child?" Eloise's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Catherine seemed to realize she'd gone too far, but pride wouldn't let her back down. "It's a promise. You want to play games with your legacy? Fine. But remember, Aunt Eloise, I learn everything I know from watching you. And unlike that innocent little girl you're so fascinated by, I know exactly how this world works." She swept from the room, Marcus following close behind. Eloise stood alone in the dining room, her hands trembling with fury. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Marcus, I need you to increase security around Sophia and Maria. Catherine just threatened the girl directly. Already on it. But Mrs. Hartwell, you need to understand something. Catherine has connections. People who owe her favors. She's not going to simply disappear because you've cut her off." "I know," Eloise said grimly. "That's what I'm counting on. She's going to make a move against Sophia, and when she does, I'm going to make sure it's the last mistake she ever makes." She hung up and moved to the window. Somewhere out there, in the guest house, Sophia was probably doing homework, unaware that she'd become the center of a battle between wealth and greed, between integrity and corruption. Eloise had started this by testing the girl's honesty. Now she needed to protect her from the consequences of passing that test. The real war for her legacy was beginning. Sophia arrived for her first lesson precisely at 4 o'clock the next afternoon. Eloise watched from her study window as the girl walked across the grounds, a notebook clutched to her chest. Even from this distance, she could see the determination in Sophia's posture, the careful way she dressed in neat clothes that were obviously her best despite their age. The girl was taking this seriously. Good. She would need that seriousness for what was coming. "Come in," Eloise called when Sophia knocked. The girl entered, closing the door behind her with quiet care. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hartwell. Sit. Before we begin, I need to tell you something important." Eloise gestured to the chair across from her desk. "My niece, Catherine, has been removed from this household. She's made threats against you." Sophia's eyes widened. "Against me? Why? I don't even know her. Because she sees you as competition for my estate. Because she believes that my interest in you somehow diminishes her claim on my wealth." Eloise leaned forward. "I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but to prepare you. From this moment forward, people will try to use you, manipulate you, or remove you. That's the cost of having value. I don't understand. I'm just me. I'm not anyone important. That's where you're wrong. The moment I chose to invest in you, you became important. And in a world where wealth equals power, importance makes you a target. Sophia absorbed this information with a maturity beyond her years. What should I do? Learn. Listen. Trust your instincts. Eloise opened a folder on her desk. Which brings us to your first real lesson. I'm going to teach you how to recognize manipulation. They spent the next 2 hours discussing tactics of influence, how people use guilt, fear, flattery, and obligation to control others. Eloise drew from her own experiences, describing boardroom battles and family betrayals with clinical precision. Sophia took notes, asked sharp questions, and demonstrated an unsettling ability to grasp complex psychological warfare. Your job, Eloise concluded, is to remain incorruptible while appearing perfectly ordinary. Never let anyone know how much you're learning. Never reveal what you understand about their motivations. Knowledge is power only when your opponents don't know you possess it. Sophia nodded slowly. That sounds lonely. The observation caught Eloise off guard. It is, she admitted. But loneliness is better than betrayal. Is it? Sophia asked quietly. Or is it just safer? Eloise stared at the girl, unsettled by the question. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Marcus. We have a situation, he said without preamble. A man approached Sophia's school today. He told one of her classmates that he was Sophia's uncle, that he had a gift for her. When the classmate said Sophia didn't have an uncle, he left quickly. The school's security footage shows him waiting across the street for 40 minutes, watching the entrance. Eloise's blood ran cold. Description? Mid-30s, expensive suit, professional demeanor. He's not in our database. I'm pulling city traffic cams to track him now. Catherine's making her move already. Appears so. Mrs. Hartwell, I recommend keeping Sophia here at the estate for the time being. It's easier to protect her on grounds we control. After the call ended, Eloise turned to Sophia. How would you like to live here full-time? Your mother too. Sophia's face showed alarm. What's happened? Eloise explained about the man at the school. To her credit, Sophia didn't panic. Instead, she thought carefully before responding. If I hide here, what does that teach me? That the moment things get dangerous, I should run behind walls? It teaches you to pick battles you can win. You're 12 years old, Sophia. You're not equipped to handle threats from adults with resources and malicious intent. But I will be, won't I? That's what you're teaching me. Sophia met her gaze steadily. If I'm going to learn how to survive in your world, shouldn't I start now? With security watching me, with you to guide me, but still living my life? Eloise saw herself in that moment, saw the stubborn pride that had driven her to walk into hostile boardrooms instead of sending representatives. The same pride that had cost her friends, relationships, peace of mind, but had built an empire. You don't understand what you're asking, Eloise said quietly. Catherine is dangerous. She's desperate, which makes her unpredictable. The man at your school was a warning. The next move will be more aggressive. Then teach me what to do when it comes. Sophia's voice didn't waver. My mother raised me to face problems, not hide from them. The words hung between them, a challenge and a plea. Eloise recognized the trap she'd set for herself. She had wanted to create someone strong enough to inherit her legacy, but strength meant risk. Protection meant weakness. There was no safe path forward. Very well, Eloise said finally. But under conditions. Marcus's team will shadow you at all times. You'll carry a panic button. You'll report anything unusual immediately. And the moment I say you come to the estate, you come. No arguments. Agreed. They shook hands, a solemn gesture that felt more binding than any contract. That evening, as Sophia left for home with her mother and a security detail following at a discreet distance, Eloise received another call from Marcus. We identified the man from the school. His name is David Reeves. He's a private investigator Catherine has used before. Specializes in digging up compromising information. On a 12-year-old girl? What could he possibly find? That's not what worries me, Marcus said grimly. I pulled his records. 3 years ago, he was investigated for manufacturing evidence. The case was dropped due to lack of proof, but the allegations were serious. He doesn't just find dirt, Mrs. Hartwell. He creates it. The implication was clear. Catherine wasn't just trying to discredit Sophia. She was planning to fabricate something that would destroy the girl's reputation, turn Eloise against her, or both. I want surveillance on Reeves. And I want a background check on everyone in Sophia's life. Teachers, classmates, neighbors. Anyone Catherine might try to use or compromise. Already in progress. But Mrs. Hartwell, there's something else. We've been monitoring Catherine's communications. She's reaching out to board members of your foundation, planting seeds of doubt about your judgment. Suggesting you're being manipulated by the Santos family. Questioning your mental competency. Eloise's jaw clenched. Of course. Catherine wasn't just attacking Sophia. She was attacking Eloise's credibility, laying groundwork for a legal challenge to any changes in her will or estate planning. Let her talk, Eloise said coldly. I've dealt with board members before. They know me better than to believe Catherine's poison. Some of them, maybe. But she's targeting the newer members, the ones who don't have personal relationships with you. And she's being subtle about it. Expressing concern, not making accusations. It's effective. After the call ended, Eloise sat in her study as darkness fell outside. She had thought she was simply rewarding integrity, mentoring a deserving child. Instead, she'd started a war. Catherine had escalated from theft to direct threats. David Reeves was circling like a shark. And now her own board members were being manipulated against her. The smart thing would be to step back. Quietly distance herself from Sophia. Let the girl live her normal life without the target Eloise had painted on her back. Provide financial support from a distance, anonymously if necessary. But Eloise Hartwell hadn't built her fortune by being smart in the conventional sense. She'd built it by being ruthless, by refusing to back down, by meeting threats with overwhelming force. If Catherine wanted a war over legacy, she would get one. Eloise pulled out her phone and began making calls. First to her lawyers, then to the private security firm she'd used for hostile takeovers, finally to contacts in media and law enforcement. By midnight, she had assembled a response team that would have intimidated a small nation. Catherine thought she was fighting for inheritance. She was about to learn she was fighting for survival. Because Eloise had made her choice. Sophia had closed the safe and asked for nothing. She had faced danger with courage instead of hiding behind protection. She had questioned whether loneliness was better than betrayal, a question Eloise herself had stopped asking decades ago. That kind of character was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth building a legacy around, even if the fight destroyed everything else in the process. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, precise and devastating. Eloise was in a board meeting when her phone erupted with alerts. Text messages, news notifications, emails, all flooding in simultaneously. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stop. The headline read, Billionaire Eloise Hartwell under investigation for inappropriate relationship with minor. Her hands went numb. Around the conference table, board members were checking their own phones, faces registering shock and confusion. Someone had leaked a story to 3 major news outlets simultaneously. The timing was calculated for maximum damage, hitting during market hours when her foundation stock would be most vulnerable. Excuse me, Eloise said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. She walked from the boardroom with measured steps, waited until she was in the private elevator before allowing her facade to crack. Catherine. This was Catherine's work, orchestrated with David Reeves. They had manufactured a scandal designed to destroy not just Eloise's relationship with Sophia, but her entire reputation. She called Marcus immediately. Tell me you're seeing this. I'm looking at it now. It's bad, Mrs. Hartwell. They've manufactured text messages supposedly from your phone to Sophia. They've got doctored photos showing you and the girl in situations that look compromising. They've even found a concerned teacher willing to go on record saying Sophia seems frightened around you. All of it is fabricated. I know that. You know that. But the court of public opinion doesn't care about truth. They've already convicted you." His voice was grim. "The foundation stock is dropping. News vans are gathering outside the estate. And Mrs. Hartwell, Child Protective Services, has been contacted. They're sending someone to interview Sophia and her mother this afternoon." Eloise closed her eyes, forcing herself to think through the fury. Catherine had struck at the one thing Eloise couldn't defend against quickly: her relationship with a child. Any attempt to explain would sound like justification. Any evidence she provided would be dismissed as the powerful trying to silence the vulnerable. It was a perfect trap. "Where is Sophia now?" "At school. I've got 3 agents on her, but Mrs. Hartwell, the media knows who she is. They're going to descend on that school within the hour. Get her out. Bring her and Maria here immediately. Don't let anyone photograph them or ask them questions. On it." Eloise returned to the boardroom where the meeting had dissolved into chaos. The chairman, Gerald Winters, approached her with barely concealed panic. "Eloise, these allegations, if there's any truth to them." "There isn't," she said flatly. "This is a fabricated attack by my niece, who I recently discovered embezzling from my accounts. She's desperate and dangerous. Can you prove that?" "I'm working on it. In the meantime, I'm temporarily stepping back from all public-facing roles with the foundation. James can handle media relations until this is resolved." Gerald looked relieved, which told Eloise everything she needed to know. The board was already preparing to distance themselves from her. 50 years of building this organization, and they would abandon her at the first whiff of scandal. She left the building through the parking garage, avoiding the news crews gathering at the front entrance. Her driver navigated through city traffic while Eloise made call after call. Her lawyers were already preparing defamation suits. Her security team was collecting evidence. Her media consultants were crafting responses. But she knew the truth. Once an allegation like this was made, the damage was permanent. Even when proven false, the stain remained. Sophia and Maria were waiting in Eloise's study when she arrived home. Maria's face was streaked with tears. Sophia sat rigid in her chair, pale but composed. "Mrs. Hartwell," Maria began, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this." "This isn't your fault," Eloise interrupted. "This is Catherine's doing. She manufactured evidence to make it look like I've been inappropriate with Sophia." Sophia spoke up, her voice clear. "What kind of evidence?" Eloise hesitated. The girl deserved honesty, but the details were ugly. Text messages that were never sent. Photos that have been doctored to appear compromising. Witness statements from people who've been paid or coerced. But none of it's real. That doesn't matter to the public. Or to the authorities who will investigate." Maria stood abruptly. "Then we'll tell them the truth. We'll tell them what you've really done for us. The education fund, the mentorship, the kindness. And they'll dismiss it as either Stockholm Syndrome or us having been compromised by money," Eloise said wearily. "This is how character assassination works, Maria. The truth becomes irrelevant beside the narrative." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she said something that made Eloise's breath catch. "Unless we prove who really did it. Unless we expose Catherine publicly, with evidence so clear that even the media can't ignore it. That's dangerous," Eloise warned. "If we go after Catherine directly, she'll escalate. She might come after you more aggressively. She's already come after me," Sophia pointed out. "And you. And my mother. Being careful hasn't protected us. Maybe it's time to stop being careful." Eloise looked at this 12-year-old girl sitting in her study, suggesting they wage open war against a desperate woman with resources and connections. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was exactly what Eloise would have done at Sophia's age, if she'd had someone to teach her how. "Marcus," Eloise called. The security chief appeared in the doorway immediately. I need everything you have on Catherine and David Reeves. Financial records, communications, travel logs, associates. Everything. And I need it weaponized for public consumption. That will take time to compile in a legally defensible way. We don't have time. Catherine has already gone nuclear. We either respond with overwhelming force or we lose everything. Marcus nodded grimly and left. Sophia stood and walked to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. Mrs. Hartwell, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Noticing me that day with the safe? Starting all of this? Eloise considered the question carefully. Her foundation was in chaos. Her reputation was being destroyed. A child and her mother were being traumatized because she decided to test household staff. Every rational analysis said she should regret the entire sequence of events. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Why not? Because for 50 years, I believed the worst about humanity. I built my entire life around that belief. And then you proved me wrong. That was worth protecting, even if the cost is high. Sophia turned from the window, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I'm scared. Good, Eloise said gently. That means you understand the stakes. But scared doesn't mean helpless. You taught me that integrity matters. Now I'm going to teach you that integrity can fight back. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Mrs. Hartwell, you need to see this. David Reeves just made a mistake. A big one. What kind of mistake? The kind that's going to end this war. David Reeves's mistake was simple: greed. Marcus had found records of a payment from Catherine to Reeves for $50,000, dated the day before the scandal broke. But Reeves, sensing opportunity, had approached 3 separate media outlets trying to sell additional evidence against Eloise for $20,000 each. 2 outlets had refused. One had recorded the conversation. He's offering to fabricate more accusations, Marcus explained, pulling up the audio file on Eloise's computer. He explicitly states he can create whatever evidence they need, for the right price. And he mentions Catherine by name as his current client. Eloise listened to the recording, hearing Reeves's casual discussion of manufacturing evidence against her. It was damning, not just for him, but for Catherine's entire case. Get this to my lawyers immediately, Eloise ordered. And send copies to every major news outlet. I want this public by morning. Already done. But Mrs. Hartwell, there's more. Once we had Reeves on tape, we got a warrant to search his files. He's been working with Catherine for weeks. We found drafts of the accusations, email chains discussing which angles would be most damaging, even practice versions of the doctored photos. Everything we need to prove the whole scandal was manufactured. Everything, Marcus confirmed. That night, Eloise, Sophia, and Maria watched as the story shifted. The recording of David Reeves hit the news cycle like a bomb. Within hours, reporters who had been breathlessly covering the allegations against Eloise were now investigating how they'd been manipulated. Catherine's name appeared in headlines, along with words like conspiracy and fabrication. By morning, the narrative had completely reversed. Child Protective Services issued a statement clearing Eloise of any wrongdoing. The Foundation's board called an emergency meeting to apologize and reinstate her. Media outlets that had run the original story published retractions. And Catherine, facing criminal charges for conspiracy and defamation, fled the state with what remained of her stolen money. But the real change came 2 weeks later, in Eloise's study. Sophia sat across from her, notebook open, working through a complex financial problem Eloise had assigned. They'd resumed their lessons, though now with additional security measures and legal protections in place. I've been thinking, Sophia said, looking up from her calculations. About what you said. That loneliness is better than betrayal. I don't think that's true anymore. Eloise raised an eyebrow. The last 2 weeks haven't convinced you otherwise? Actually, they've convinced me of the opposite. Sophia closed her notebook. You could have protected yourself by cutting us off. By sacrificing me and my mother to save your reputation. But you didn't. You fought for us. That's not loneliness. That's loyalty. The words settled into Eloise's chest, warm and unexpected. And I've been thinking about legacy, Sophia continued. You said empires mean nothing if they crumble when their creator dies. But maybe legacy isn't about buildings or money. Maybe it's about teaching someone the right way to use those things. A profound observation for a 12-year-old. I learned from a good teacher. Sophia smiled, then grew serious. Mrs. Hartwell, I want you to know something. I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to work harder than anyone. I'm going to learn everything you teach me. And when I'm older, I'm going to use what you've given me to help people who need it. Like your mother helped me, just by being honest when she thought no one was watching. Exactly like that. Eloise stood and moved to the window, looking out over grounds that suddenly felt less like a fortress and more like a home. She had spent 50 years building walls against betrayal. It had taken a child to show her that walls could protect, but they could also imprison. I'm going to change my will, Eloise said quietly. Not all of it, but significant portions. Your educational fund will become a trust that activates on my death. It will pay for your university, but also include provisions for business capital when you're ready to start your own ventures. You'll have resources, but also responsibility. That's too much. It's exactly right. But Sophia, understands something. I'm not doing this because you're perfect or because I think you'll never make mistakes. I'm doing it because you understand that character matters more than cleverness. That integrity is harder than corruption but infinitely more valuable. What about Catherine? She's your family. Catherine made her choices. She chose theft over honesty. She chose to attack a child rather than earn her own success. Those choices have consequences. Eloise turned from the window. Family is more than blood, Sophia. It's about who shows up, who stays loyal, who can be trusted with the truth. By that measure, you're more my family than Catherine ever was. Maria appeared in the doorway, summoned by Eloise for this conversation. Mrs. Hartwell, I don't know how to thank you for everything. Don't thank me, Eloise interrupted gently. You raised a daughter with integrity in a world that rewards corruption. You taught her right from wrong when it would have been easier to teach her shortcuts. Everything good about Sophia comes from you. Maria's eyes filled with tears. And Maria, your salary isn't tripling. It's quintupling. You'll manage the household staff with full authority. Consider it a promotion you've earned through 8 years of impeccable service. After they left, Eloise sat alone with the revised will her lawyers had prepared. She read through the provisions, the trusts, the conditions designed to ensure her wealth would be used responsibly by someone who understood its weight. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Catherine had been arrested attempting to board an international flight. The embezzled money had been frozen. She would face trial for theft, conspiracy, and attempted fraud. Eloise felt no satisfaction at the news, only a profound sadness. Catherine could have had everything if she'd simply been patient, if she'd proven herself worthy instead of trying to steal what she thought was owed. But she'd chosen the easy path, and the easy path always led to ruin. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Sophia entered, alone this time. Mrs. Hartwell, I wanted to ask you something. Yes? That first day, with the safe. Did you know I wouldn't take the money? Is that why you left it open? Eloise smiled sadly. I hoped you wouldn't. But no, I didn't know. I'd lost faith in people by then. I was testing you because I expected you to fail. What would you have done if I'd taken it? I would have confirmed what I believed about human nature. And I would have spent the rest of my life alone, protected by money but starved of meaning. She paused. You didn't just pass a test that day, Sophia. You saved me from a future where wealth was the only thing that mattered. Sophia nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then she said something that made Eloise's eyes sting with unexpected tears. I'm glad I closed the safe. So am I, child. So am I. As evening fell over the estate, Eloise stood at her window watching Sophia and Maria walk together across the grounds, their security detail following at a respectful distance. They were laughing about something, mother and daughter, safe and protected in a world that had tried to destroy them. Eloise had spent 50 years believing that everyone could be bought, that trust was foolish, that isolation was strength. A 12-year-old girl had proven every assumption wrong. Legacy, she realized, wasn't about the empire you built. It was about finding someone worthy to inherit not just your wealth, but your wisdom. It was about teaching the next generation that integrity wasn't weakness, that honesty had power, that character could withstand even the cruelest attacks. She pulled out her phone and called her lawyers. Add one more provision to the will, she instructed. Establish a foundation in Sofia Santos's name. Purpose: to provide mentorship and resources to children who demonstrate exceptional integrity regardless of their economic background. Initial funding $50 million. Consider it done, Mrs. Hartwell. After the call ended, Eloise returned to her desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was the silver bookmark she'd given Sophia, or rather, an identical copy she'd kept for herself. She ran her finger over the engraving. Character is what you do when no one is watching. For decades, she'd stopped believing those words. But Sophia had lived them, in that quiet moment with an open safe and a choice that would change both their lives. The test hadn't been about money at all, Eloise realized. It had been about recognizing that hope still existed in a cynical world. That integrity could be taught and protected. That legacy was measured not in wealth accumulated, but in values passed on to someone worthy. The billionaire woman who had lost faith in humanity sat in her study as darkness fell, feeling something she hadn't felt in 50 years. Hope. And beside it, something even more precious: purpose. The test was over. The real work of building a legacy was just beginning.